Hello, my name is Ruth Nelson, and welcome to this week's Master Coaches Wednesday Weekly Buzz and our after show, Buzz Reaction, both hosted by John Foreman. Our most recent guest discussed how a mindset coach is different than a leadership coach, and we found it very encouraging how a mindset coach could provide such great support to a first-year head coach during the challenging times during COVID. Our news flash, high school update, 5 states that are shown in blue played postseason but without finals. 30 states in gray played state championships, and only 14 states listed in red delayed their season to either the winter or spring. Get your updates for high school. Go to nfhs.org. We are all maxed out this fall with combines, showcases, talent ID events being held for athletes to display their talent to D2, D3, NIA, and junior colleges. And for all those D1 coaches, you may view these events virtually since you are still in the dead period. Dead period. If you were reading a crystal ball, will it read in January? Dead period lifted or extended until March? NCAA has dedicated a section of their website titled Taking Action, which specifically addresses name, image, and likeness. One specific quote by Michael V. Drake, former chair of the NCAA Board of Governors, states, "Allowing promotions and third-party endorsement is an uncharted territory." Stay up on NIL with our weekly Buzz Show. Get your updates on boys and men's collegiate programs. Go to firstpointvolleyball.com. For the most recent updates on the remaining conferences still playing this fall, head over to our Instagram account, click on the bio, and listen to Mondays with Mick. Did you know Brian Gimmillero, 9 times Big West Coach of the Year, Bob Bertucci earned SEC Conference and Patriot Coach of the Year, 3-time Atlantic 10 Coach of the Year, and 3-time, and I was trying to figure out how to say it, but it's EIVA Coach of the Year, and Mick Haley, 2-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year, and 6-time Southwest Conference Coach of the Year. All will be asking our guest to provide us why he chose to write a book and how his experience has provided him so much knowledge to continue to develop leaders in sport. First, let's head over to Austin, Texas, where former Olympic coach Mick Haley will introduce our featured guest today. Mick?
Thank you, Ruth. But did you know Ruth Nelson was a head coach of both our USA Junior National teams and our World University Games teams? She was also head coach of the Dallas Bells in the first professional league here in the United States. And get this is the best part of Ruth this morning.
Okay. He's froze.
All right, I'm back again. All right. Ruth designed her own shoe, and it was adopted, the Ruth Nelson side-out volleyball shoe, and it was endorsed as the official shoe of the NAIA. Now, that's pretty good. I bet most of you did not know that about Ruth. Today's guest, though, is very special. Jeff Moore, 2-time NCAA National Championship coach at the University of Texas, as well as fellow member of the Longhorn Hall of Honor and the College Tennis Hall of Fame. He was honored as NCAA Coach of the Year and has a master's degree at UT. But I have to tell you about that because Jeff came to UT his first year and was required to get that master's degree, and he about killed himself on a moped trying to get to class on time. And that's a story for another time, Jeff, but I'll let you tell that story. We all had a pretty good laugh with that. But today, Jeff is now the CEO of More Leadership, LLC, and I believe has written a bestseller called Strive Together. Jeff, I'm going to start this right out, and I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for coming on and
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know you want to hear this abuse, but I'm really excited to hear your answer to these questions. How did you get involved in writing the book, and how has the transition from coaching champions to teaching leadership been for you?
Well, I actually didn't write the book until end of 2019. I did write a book earlier in the process after I retired called Raising Strivers about parenting. But that was a micro book just to flesh ideas out. Where this concept really hit me was 2 years after I retired, I became the athletic director at a K through 8 school. And I said to the parents, I want to help your young people, your children, build strong relationships to self, team, and coach. And I got looks as if I was speaking Mandarin. And it occurred to me, the more I got to know the parents, because I'd been in coaching college, I had not been in the junior ranks or the high school ranks or with younger kids, that the parents were really concerned about their children's resume. They didn't want to compete. They didn't want their young people to compete in practice, or even they wanted to be able to select where they competed against other teams. So I was very frustrated, and I was on the phone one day with a colleague at Brown named Paul Wardlaw. He's no longer there, but he was the coach at Brown, and we've known each other forever. And I was talking to him about this, and he said, Jeff, go look up the word compete in the dictionary. And I did, and the modern definition is to outdo for a prize or supremacy. And I thought, that's weird. That doesn't sound quite right. He said, now scroll down to the origin. Well, the origin of compete from late Latin in the 1600s is to strive together. And I thought, wow. Now, most people in HR and the HR world we live in would say, oh, I know what that means. That means we all hold hands and skip and sing Kumbaya. But what strive together, what competing used to mean, and it wasn't that long ago, was, Ruth, if you and I are opponents, or let's say on a field or a court, or even if we're sitting around a boardroom debating an issue, if we're competitors, in the end, whether you win the project or I do, maybe there's not even a result attached. In the end, ultimately, we make each other better. So I suddenly realized that, oh, now I know where this word collaborates come from. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, work together. And I thought, we're stuck between collaborate, work together, which is kind of a mean everything, mean nothing word, and cutthroat, which is the modern definition of compete. So what occurred to me over time was there's a third way. Between back in the 70s when I started coaching, there was the Bobby Knight approach, destroy or be destroyed, survival of the fittest. We lost so many young people because high school coaches emulated him. So that wasn't right, but of course we did a 360 instead of a 180. And now, starting in the late 70s, the self-esteem movement began, and it was taught in classes. In 1988, the state of California legislated the teaching of self-esteem. So we've done a 360 to now everyone's special. So I came up with that concept, and it was so powerful. And it was so great to work through that at the school that I was at as athletic director and build relationships with the parents and see their reactions, that I wanted to have a broader impact. I wanted to have a different challenge. So I went to a psychologist at the University of Texas and had him help me build an assessment which assesses your willingness to strive together. And then I got started first I was a speaker, and then I got started with my consulting. So that's how things rolled. So by the time I wrote the book, I wanted to make sure that it had as much of, that I had really thought this through. And to be honest, also to have done a ton of consulting. So I was learning, because the coolest thing about doing what I'm doing now is I'm learning. I've learned more in the last 6 years than I learned probably the previous 20, because I'm out there in your element and seeing you in action. I'm not just talking to colleagues on the phone, and I'm working with coaches in different sports. And right now I'm working with lots of companies. So that's the most exciting thing about this.
Wow.
Bob, do you have a question for Jeff?
Well, yeah, I do, Jeff. I mean, in talking about strive together and trying to apply it to coaching, and particularly coaching young adults, high school age kids, college age kids. I mean, right now in the college game, of course, as coaches, we want to provide the best experience for our athletes possible. And part of that is striving together, to make us the best that we could be as a group, as a team. And we get this chance to compete. And it's interesting to hear these definitions of compete, because I guess my understanding of compete is that, you know, you've strived together as a team, and then you want to go out and you want to measure how well it worked. All right. And now what we're being faced with as coaches at the college level is, you know, we're having these surveys of the athletes. The athletes do surveys. And at the end of that, you know, administrators are making decisions based on these surveys, but there's no feedback going to the coaches. All right. And the coaches have no input into the process at all, other than, you know, they hear about it afterwards. So I'd like to know what your feelings are, you know, about these surveys and how it relates to, you know, the leadership things that you're doing right now.
Well, what I've discovered in all I've worked with over 100 coaches in either workshops or consulting in a variety of sports at probably 28 different schools. And one common theme is that coaches today are being evaluated on two criteria. The first one is a criteria that we've always been evaluating. How did your team do this season? But the second one is new and different, and it doesn't really reconcile with the first one. Did your student athletes, by the way, I hate that term. They're athletes. Come on, man. Did your student athletes have a positive experience? And so you're stuck. You're completely stuck. So here's the problem is most of us can't recruit a team, you know, a Calipari, a team of racehorses that's going to automatically be in the top 10 unless we completely blow it, right? We're going to have to develop our athletes. In order to develop your athletes, they have to become comfortable with becoming uncomfortable. You have to challenge them to be uncomfortable. And that's great until Susie or Johnny goes to see the AD or goes to see the administrator or the parent calls in. So we're really, really stuck. And I actually had two coaches who I won't name who were high-ranked administrators at Power 5 schools, both of whom had been, they were associate ADs, but they had been good coaches, and it'll make sense after what I tell you. The first one said, you know, the NCAAs, their push is for fairness and what is it? Fairness, well-being, and academics. He goes, shouldn't that be a given? Aren't we in athletic departments? And the other one, a very, very well-known or very successful women's basketball coach said, you know, at our university in our exit interviews, almost all of our student athletes at the end of their experience said they're happy. And then she paused and then she said, is that all? So what about, hey, you challenged me to do things that I never thought I could do. No, there's none of that. So I think the app creates a problem because it circumvents, as all of you know, it circumvents the coach and athlete relationship, which is crucial. Because I don't think you teach leadership. I think you can teach management because it's a science, but leadership's an art and it has to be cultivated through the way that you run practice, through the way that you interact. It can't be taught in a classroom. So, and the coach is the one who can cultivate that in the young people that they work with.
Okay. Brian, you have a question for
Yeah, I'm fascinated by what you say. If I can give you a quick preview, after we, were successful for a while, I spoke to several businesses, and I always found it fascinating that they really didn't want to hear me at the end, because I always felt that they wanted teamwork and cooperation and all these things, responsibility from their employees, and then they pitted them against each other for success. And I always thought, wait, that doesn't go together. So that was always a difficult challenge for me. I also always thought and always told players that the best player was the one that made their teammates better. I was always upset. And when I spoke to coaches and they had these charts on the wall, even our Olympic team, where every player competed against each other and they were rated how they did against each other instead of rated about how they did against themselves, how they contributed to the whole. So that's just my editorial. So I was fascinated by what you said. But my question is really, what do you suggest? What do we do? What can you give to the coaches and players who are administrators who are listening? What do you suggest we do?
Well, I think what we need to do is understand, and I remember there's one athletic director that actually I had a great relationship with. I won't name the person, but most administrators were not on the same page, as you probably know, with their coaches these days because they haven't coached. And that's not a deal breaker. They don't want to learn about coaches because let's face it, our fraternity, our sorority, our community of coaches, we're weird. We're weird. We're different. You have to be fanatical to be a coach. You have to be a little off. So an AD or a leader has to learn that. We're not like a corporation. We're a group of semi-autonomous units, our teams. So the first thing I said to this AD, we had a great relationship. I said, do you realize that the only people on your campus who aren't held accountable are the student athletes? Because the way you're evaluating them is you're asking them at the end of the season, you, the athletic director, are asking them, what did you think of the coach? This is an 18-year-old who's never done anything except go to school and play volleyball or tennis or whatever. Was the coach organized? Is the coach knowledgeable? What do you think of sports medicine? Oh, they've got an MD now. So they are evaluating the coach. You are evaluating the coach. They're not held accountable. So I presented this AD with an evaluation that I showed to you that would help the AD cultivate in the student athletes an empowerment and challenge the student athletes to be responsible for their own actions, to respond to the coach when the coach pushes them to become uncomfortable. My definition of the word compete in sports is making the opposition uncomfortable with purpose-driven execution. That's my definition. Are you doing that every day in practice? Did your coach challenge you to do that? If you had a problem with your coach, did you go talk to your coach directly? If you had a problem with a teammate, did you go talk to the teammate directly? Because unless you communicate, unless you push your teammate in practice, you're not supporting them. This is not, it's not a fraternity or sorority. And then the last one I had, the last question I asked on the student athlete evaluation was, if you communicated with your coach, were you heard? So what I suggested is I said, you're getting feedback from your student athletes in organizations like SAC, right? Why are you asking him these questions? And it's very damaging. And he stopped taking student athlete meetings unless he sensed there was some sort of abuse. He sent them right back to the coach, and then he retired, unfortunately. That's really the key. Is it's got to start at the top, and the top is no longer the AD. The top is now the college president.
Right. The whole idea that you said, to be successful, a challenge must happen. The coach must find a way to get the best. I mean, if you're teaching a piano lesson, if you're going to be a great pianist, the coach is going to have to really push you. I think more and more coaches are afraid to do that. I think that it's a real disservice to athletes, so they'll never touch what they could touch. Now, I'm not defending actions by coaches that are inappropriate, but my concern is a coach challenging a player, which is really their job, in a proper way. And now the fear of that is then it becomes a questionnaire at the end. Do you have a response to that?
Right. I mean, and that's the issue. I think the middle way between, again, the Bobby Knight way and everyone's special practice as a dance party, which a lot of them are these days, is to cultivate in the athletes a willingness to compete, which to me is solving problems, executing purpose-driven execution to make them uncomfortable. What am I doing with my volleyball serve? What are we doing tactically to make the opposition uncomfortable? And are we doing that with purpose-driven execution? To run a practice that way, so they're putting them in situations where they have to solve really difficult problems, game situations that they can't possibly succeed at, but their willingness to to go at it, to attack a problem. And curiously, that's what's happening in the real world now. In the real world, most people who work are not solving problems that have answers, like back in the day. They're solving problems that don't have answers. So putting them in that scenario and then reinforcing their willingness to do that through comments, through observations and questions about their willingness to problem solve, to learn a new skill, and to persevere through that process. That makes sense? Because so that's relationship to self, and relationship to team. I've got to be willing to do that, to push you and accept being pushed. So
Well, Jeff,
I'm willing to hit a serve that makes you, to execute in a way that makes you uncomfortable, and to accept you doing that back at me. And then the coach has to reinforce that.
Got it.
Jeff, the issue though is, we don't disagree with anything that you're saying here. The problem is the system doesn't allow that to happen. Right? If you actually challenge athletes, hold them accountable, make them responsible, that's going to make them uncomfortable. And then they're going to end up, that instead of them accepting that challenge, then they're going to end up going and complaining to the athletic director or the senior women's administrator or on the survey that, that they don't like what's going on. All right. And then it's not that the coach is getting supported for challenging or holding the athlete accountable. All right. They're finding themselves in trouble for doing that.
Right. Well, I think what I try to work with coaches on, I think the problem ultimately is that the ADs, they're stuck between the ADs and the athletes and the college presidents. But the approach that's worked with some of the coaches that I've had the pleasure of working with is, instead of constantly instructing and correcting, which and taking a negative instructive approach, is to ask questions, make observations. What are you trying to achieve with this tactic? Can you push through this? And there are zillions of ways to do that. There's a one-on-one way. You can say something to one athlete that you're trying to, and you know this, get a message to another athlete with a question that you ask based on the execution. So focused on competing and not winning and losing. And I think coaches give off this, I'm desperate to win. They give off this feeling of trends toward outcomes. And so there's that middle way that I think can help. But ultimately, I think, and really that sets a much higher bar than our goal is to win NCAAs or our goal is to win the conference. No, our goal is a team that no one wants to play, right? And that will take you that will give you the best chance of winning that championship. But my recommendation for athletic departments would be, the first athletic director that decides he wants to cultivate a spirit and not promote a culture. This is what I work. And by the way, I can talk to a group of athletes one day, college students, and I have trouble. I have to really provoke them to get a pulse. The next week, I can be talking to a group of software salespeople who might be 2 or 3 years older, and they are enraptured in what I'm saying because they're in the real game now. They've woken up. So how do we make athletics once again be more like the real game? Well, athletic directors need to empower the coaches to in turn empower the athletes. And athletic directors need to learn the same thing that CEOs need to learn if they want to be leaders versus managers. And you do that by focusing on striving together, competing, not winning.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. Otherwise, I'm going to end up not getting to ask my question here. I listened. Brian just said, what do we do now? Bob jumped in because Bob's still coaching. Mick's still wanting to coach. I think he's a little crazy wanting to do that, but that's okay. And Brian and I are just looking at this. So my analogy is, I'm 8 years old and I want something done. I go to my mom and my mom says, no, you're not going to get that. You can go talk to your dad. Okay, then I go to the dad and I said, Dad, I really need this because of this. My friends have this. They have an iPhone. They have an iPad and I need this. And Dad says, it's okay. I'll talk to your mom. Basically, we are creating the atmosphere where the kids feel if they don't get the answer they want, they need to go to somebody else. But the kids now are forgetting about going to get the first answer. They're going and jumping to the person who makes the decision. So to me, Jeff, you've shared your story, your experiences, and what challenges that you've had, and what you're hearing about coaching and ways in which you're providing support. Do you feel these issues are at all levels, college, high school, even the highest sport? And what takeaways would you want a coach to have after reading your book? And I'm going to read it because I'm now even more interested because you're a fellow tennis player.
Well, from birth to college, today's parent is most concerned about their child's resume. So it's all about the resume. And that's why they're afraid to compete. They're afraid to put themselves in difficult situations. I'm not optimistic because I think it's a problem. I'm the son of an educator. I'm very much into educational reform. I think colleges and athletic departments are being run like corporations. And as I told one college president recently, the more you run a college like a corporation, the less you're preparing them for the actual corporate world, because your product is a young person and there's no time to market. We got to deliver this finished product to market with a person. It's a evolving, changing, and every student athlete is different. It's all about becoming. So can you send someone who's willing to strive together into a real world that's far more complicated than the one we graduated into?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
okay, so let me ask you this. So everybody's now coaching. They call them coaches for corporation. So they're trying to incorporate the name of coaches because maybe we've had so much success in coaching that they're trying to get more success. And maybe we're doing corporate because we think that's what businesses should be run like.
right. Well, and it's interesting you say that. Corporations are far more receptive of my message because I ask them, the ones that work with me anyway, that are attracted to my message, I say, how do you raise the bar? And they very rarely say by raising the quota, the number, using sales as an example. I'm working with ShipStation now, and the head of sales said, no. Our high bar is build a strong relationship to customer. And what does that mean? So he and I have devised a skill, what we call skill will. The will is strivership, which is what I espouse. And the skills are the skills that will be needed to build a strong relationship to customer. What does that mean? He said, well, I've got plenty of guys that can close deals, but because some people have no clue about shipping. So you give a good pitch, they close the deal. But how do they feel about that relationship? Are they going to stay with you, number one? And even more important, are they going to give you word of mouth? So.
Wow. Well, I'm going to tell you this. We need to have you back because we have run out of time. And Mick is going to talk a little bit about next week, but he also is going to talk to you a little about how wonderful you've been today.
Thank you, Ruth. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for being on.
Coming on.
Jeff.
I would think that anybody listening would want to read your book just to hear the concepts. This is a different message than is out there. I think your message is really special. I think whether you're in corporate or in school or coaching or what you're in, this is a good message and a message for a parent. So thanks so much for sharing. It's exciting because, we spent a number of years working together. Always appreciated what you did with your teams and your kids, and you were extremely successful. So thank you very much for coming on, and I hope maybe we can do this again.
Hey, Jeff, can you tell us the name of your book?
Strive together, achieve beyond expectations in a results-obsessed world.
All right.
Thank
All
you,
right.
John.
We're ready to close out.
All right, well,
Thanks
next week.
again.
Interesting.
next week.
Jeff, you may even want to listen in next week. We're going to have two coaches on, a former head coach who actually participated in some of these surveys you were talking about, and a present head coach who's gone through some of the stuff that Ruth decided. We'll have Dietrich Collins on, the former head coach at San Diego State, and Molly Albee from the University of Cincinnati. And we're really excited about having both of those ladies on to talk to, and we'll continue to strive for together.
Thank you, Mac.
All right.
Thanks for your mentorship, Mac.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
All right, book your fall virtual clinics today for you, your team, or your coaches. Please head over to Instagram and click on our bio and click on the virtual clinic link, or you may scan our QR code that will take you directly to our information. Our weekly Buzz shows are on YouTube, and you can access these by going directly to our Instagram account. Follow us on Facebook, Volleyball Master Coaches, Instagram and Twitter, VB Master Coaches. A special shout out to our partners, SNA Sports and Baden Sports. You may still register for the 2020 AVCA Virtual Convention, which provides you over 100 hours of training. Master Coaches will be presenting 3 sessions. Sign up today by going to avca.org. Stay on Facebook Live, and our host closes our show, and join our Master Buzz reaction for an opportunity to hear and engage in our most recent talks. Now, let's go to our host, John Foreman, who will update us on his podcast series. And Jeff, I see you're still there listening to our marketing. All right, John.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, actually upcoming on the podcast, I guess this would be episode 5, is, and actually if you're a patron, you've already got it, but it's Mick interviewing Brian. And it was nominally for Volleyball Coaching Wizards, but I thought the content was current enough and appropriate enough, especially some of the business discussions that Brian talked about in his work at Long Beach State, that I decided to include it as a podcast. So for those of you who are not patrons already, and go out and become one, and you get it right now, it'll drop on Sunday, so you can see it then. And more information, as always, is available at coachingvb.com.